life is short. I want to give it a go. If I don't make it, at least I can look back and say to myself, I tried, and I learned a lot from it.
Went all in, played my cards right. Up the ante, won blackjack all night. Roll the dice, let it ride. Water the odds, I got snake eyes.
This podcast exists because of the team at CASCM. CASCM is a B2B content production company helping organizations create and share their stories. We aim to create space where businesses can build assets and drive revenue through writing and talking. Content creation should be enjoyable and accessible. At CASCM, we love helping make that happen. Learn more at cascm.com.
What's really cool, Robin, is when I have an opportunity to learn about you before we're going to talk, right? We talk with your team, we learn about you that way, is I can get on X, I can get on LinkedIn, I can listen to podcasts, YouTube videos, and I've already seen you, I've heard you speak. I see your perspectives, and this conversation is a lot about different perspectives, right? That you have on.
Sure, yeah.
And I can see it right off the bat. You have a lot of perspectives on things, right? And just now we're talking about college, and you have a kid in college. I have a kid in college, one on the way, another one down the pipe. And by the time she comes up, and she's in that engineering, computer space, right, and a lot of other interests, things are changing very fast. And
yeah, really.
Like, to keep it simple, like, what is your perspective today on college and all that's happened over the last many years? And as things are evolving and AI comes into this space, like, as I heard you say that before, I wasn't really thinking about that's where I would start this conversation, but here we are.
Sure. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think, of course, the idea of growth and learning is super important. And for some people, the best environment for that is college. I don't have a higher education myself. So I took the route of learning by doing. That was my path. But my son, who's just started college this year, he's going to Madison. He very much loved the academic environment, and he's excelling at it. I'm just very proud of him. He just got A's in his first semester, which is
awesome.
Really cool.
Yeah.
So he's really leaning into it. And I think there's some skills that you need to learn. You can either learn from others or you can learn by doing. And both are valid. But at some point, you have to, of course, apply that knowledge somehow, right? I think of it this way, honestly, is that there's a lot of fundamental skills that you can learn. You can learn that again from school, or you can learn it from reading and so on. I think when you go into the job market and you're trying to get your first job or your second job or third job, what will oftentimes, I think, get you in the door are the hard skills. And that could be, okay, if you're a brand new grad, people will look at your resume, which school you went to, what did you study, and they'll try to hire you for that. Oftentimes, not always. And the same certainly when you're in the job market, like let's say you've got 5 years experience or 10 years experience, they oftentimes look at your past and they apply some pattern recognition and say, you have these skills, this is why you're suitable for this job. So I think a lot of the hard skills will get you in the door. But in my experience, virtually at 100%, it's the soft skills that will get you further ahead. And that's why when I do a lot of coaching with people, it's a lot on the soft skills, because that is what will unlock future growth for you. The mentorship, the growth, the way you communicate and collaborate and set yourself apart and so on. That's something I don't worry that AI is going to come and eat our lunch anytime soon,
Absolutely. It's fascinating because I talk to so many people in leadership positions and someone like yourself, and you lead with that. And it's hard because you watch kids coming up in middle school and high school and college where, what did you get in your SAT? What's your GPA?
Right.
Like, how did you do in this class? And if you don't have that, all of a sudden that student feels like, I don't know what I'm going to do because I'm not matching my peers on this. So it's really tough. But then you talk to people who are in the position of hiring, the position of leader, the position of thinking like, here's where we're going to go, to say, this student, this person, this kid over here, they walk into my office, they shake my hand, they look me in the eyes, they can have a conversation about myriad of different topics. Where someone like you would say that, like, I see something there. Like, no doubt the hard skills will get you that job, but so what do we do? I guess it's having conversations like this possibly and more, right?
Yeah, but it's interesting, I think, because I actually coach and mentor quite a few young people. I just started coaching somebody last month, actually. She's still in college and she kind of wants some guidance. And I was introduced to this mentorship program, me and a bunch of other people. And I gave her this advice. I said, the main thing you have going for you at this early stage in your life and career as you start applying for jobs and so on, two things. The energy you show up with and the initiative that you take. That's something that you control 100%. Nobody can take that away from you. The energy, the way you show up, like you just said, you high energy passion. You shake people's hand, you look them in the eye, you answer with conviction and energy and so on. That's something you can control. It's not always easy, right? But you can still control. And the second thing is initiative. So the way you find something that maybe nobody has solved, or find small challenges or problems that nobody's kind of paying attention to, but you know that that can be a game changer. If you take things off your boss's plate, or you come with solutions and you come with new ideas. So I'll tell you a good example. When I was kind of coming up through my career journey, I've been at Salesforce for a bunch of years, and that had really kind of helped propel my career. I kind of solidified a little bit of a name for myself in Silicon Valley. Then Fox, which was an up and coming company, they reached out to me and said, "Hey, whatever you did at Salesforce, we'd love for you to come do that at Fox because we want to be the next great enterprise software company." So I went in, I thought, okay, I'm going to go chat with them. So I went and chatted with the CEO, Aaron Levy, super great guy, high energy and so on. And I remember in this interview, we're chatting and so on. And then he said, because I was interviewing for this role of head of enterprise marketing. And so he said, "So, okay, if you came in here, like, what are some ideas would you give me 10 good ideas? I'd love to just get going quickly. We have no time to lose." So I start get off from the couch, start mapping out some ideas. I go, here's an idea. Here's what we should do based on, again, my experience at Salesforce and other companies. And I get through 4 ideas. And then he goes well, give me 6 more. And I'm just because I thought it was more like a rhetorical question. What are some good ideas you have? He really wanted 10 ideas. So I had to think super fast on my feet, right? Oh shit. He really wants 10 ideas. So I mapped it out. And I just kind of tried to use the momentum of the conversation because there's a flow in a conversation. We're building on each other. And he's like, "What if we did this?" And yeah, okay, here's what I would do. And I ended up getting the job, of course, right? But it's that idea of using energy and initiative, 2 things that you can completely control. If I had just kind of said, "I only have 5 now, I'll come back with you later with the 5, I probably wouldn't have gotten that job, honestly, right?
Yeah. How do you handle that moment, in that moment when you're sitting there and you're thrown off your game possibly?
Yeah.
Right? Your mind's what am I going to do? I don't have any other ideas. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to do, right? To think on your feet like that.
Completely. And they were all great ideas, but I just thought, I don't think that's he wasn't looking for greatness. He was just looking for somebody who could think on their feet, right? Because in tech, or when you're in a fast moving startup, things change so fast. And you want people who can kind of roll with the changes and transformations and the ambiguity that oftentimes comes with those kind of jobs.
Yeah. Does that version of you today, if you're sitting in there, you're like, "Hold on real quick, let me pull out my AI assistant over here and come up with these ideas"?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a great point. I know we're joking about, but this is where AI is a superpower. Why wouldn't you use AI to help you say, "Hey, I've got," and of course, it's all about the prompt that you have. "I've got some ideas in this field, blah, blah, blah. Give me 3 more ideas." I actually use it a lot for that kind of stuff. And it's great.
Yeah.
Of course, it's great. Yeah, for sure. I think you'd kind of be a fool not to use it for that kind of stuff, right?
Absolutely.
It's not yet real time. So if you're sitting in an interview and you're going, "Hey, hold on."
Yeah, that's right. Oh, it's got an update. I got to update it real quick. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. "Oh shit, I'm out of my ChatGPT credits." Yeah.
Let me create a cloud account real quick. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Quick. Hang on 1 sec.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, that takes energy, right? For you to be in there, because probably while you're sitting in that room, it's just to show up, right? Just showing up, boom, you're bringing it down. If we're looking at, right, your gas tank, your battery tank, on your iPhone, whatever, it's going down it. And then all this stuff happens. And then a big uncomfortable question comes. It's a little bit more energy. And then you can probably go up and down, right?
Yeah.
And I could see this in your videos. I can see this in your tweets, everything, LinkedIn. You have a lot of energy. You're front and center in a lot of your pictures. And you're doing it, I think, in a way that's just to help other people see this and to be positive. And then you show up on this interview, you're laughing, you're talking, smile, right? The whole thing. You've just been traveling across the world, right?
Yeah.
Where is this energy coming from? I mean, there's a lot of different ways, but where is this energy coming from?
Mm-hmm. I would say I recognized fairly early on in my life that this is one of my superpowers. There's no doubt about it. And I think a lot of people make the assumption that I'm hyper extroverted. And I can, of course, turn it on. But I also really like to recover. I like time for myself. I like to be introspective and so on. But I think of it this way, because I recognized early on in my life and career that the energy I put out there, I would oftentimes get mirrored back to me. So I try to show up, whether I have a one-on-one with somebody on my team or I go into a group meeting, I try to show up in a way that makes it worthwhile for them. It's just so many times in my life where I've had a meeting on the calendar and I'm like, kind of dreading it because I don't want to spend time with that person because they're low energy or heavy and so on. And I never want somebody to think that way when I enter the room or I'm part of the conversation. I want it to be a net positive for everybody around them. And I think, I mean, the world can be quite a heavy place, you know, so the idea that you can lift people up just by the way you show up, I think is really strong. So I've learned that early on, but I've also learned to harness it, Eric, to be honest. Like, for example, I know in any conversation, there's a flow, right? And sometimes the flow goes up and sometimes it goes down. And you can't keep most conversations at the same level the entire time. I think if you keep it too low, then oftentimes it becomes void of energy. If you keep it too high, then you kind of really like, you feel exhausted after that kind of like conversation. So there's a flow to it. And I learned this, I'll tell you. So very early in my career, I was sent by my boss. This is in 2001, when I just kind of moved to California. I was sent by my boss to give a presentation to about 300 sales reps in Orlando, Florida. I was in California at that point in time. I was pretty new at this job. I was a 22-year-old product marketing manager. And I went to this hardcore sales team and I was presenting in front of them and I completely bombed this presentation. I mean, like really, I had people come up to me afterwards and like, hey, are you okay? I was like shaking. I didn't stare at the audience. I was just looking at the screen. I had like sweat pits under my arms, all those kind of uncomfortable things, right?
Yeah.
And it was so awful, right? It was so awful. But it was really good in one way because I said to myself afterwards, never again. I never want this experience. So I went on this journey to learn how do I communicate in the best way that captures people's attentions and uses my body language, my energy, and so on. And so I did a lot of the classic things. I read books about it. I took presentation skills courses and so on. But the best thing I did by far was I took acting lessons. I went to Stanford and Berkeley. They're kind of evening classes and weekend. And I took acting lessons. I'm like, I've always admired people who stand up on stage and think about how they use their voice, their body, totality themselves to kind of captivate you, right? They're not always yelling. Sometimes they're like whispering softly and they're trying to like captivate you. And I've thought, if I can combine this notion of entertainment with actually being informative in what I say, that's the magic combination of being a good communicator, is that you're both informing, but information without entertainment, kind of boring. And if you're only entertaining, but you're not really informing, it might be good in the moment, but you don't remember shit of it anyway. So it's like that combination of what I've tried to master over the years. And it wasn't always easy. I'm still improving, but I feel like I've gotten to a point where I can tell the flow of a conversation so it hopefully stays captivating with the people who are listening.
Yeah, that's beautiful because there's a lot of studies like if someone's dealing with pain, chronic pain, like they talk about acting, right? Because you're not thinking about anything before, you're not thinking about anything after. You're probably more concerned about your lines, right?
Yeah.
And then on top of it, to do it for somebody else and watching, like I had mentioned before, like my daughter's very much into acting and you can see that come out and like, imagine what that can do for someone. Like, let's say you go into business and you work for a software company, they need someone to present that, just like you were talking about. And that's in the category of soft skills, right? Like your presentation. Yeah. And that's awesome. And it's weird too, because we go through these moments that are real struggles, right? And I think this is where college can come in. It's like you go break stuff, go start a company, go fail a class, right? And don't fail a class, but you know what I'm saying? Like if it's not working, that's like the trial and error and then getting into the application aspect of it. Oh, that's good.
This is absolutely the time in your life to go do that. I mean, I'd like to say in an ideal version that everyone still has the courage as they get older. But of course, it gets harder because for many reasons, you have the responsibilities of life and so on. I mean, like, I think it's well documented in my story of buying a one-way ticket from Copenhagen to California when I was 21. It was also easier then. I'm not under any illusion that I could do the same today. Was it hard then? Of course it was. And it still required courage, but it was also easy. I had nothing to lose, right? Like, I knew if I failed, like my family would be there. They'd welcome me back with open arms. You know, Denmark was not going anywhere, right? So I think in your 20s, especially in your 20s, that is absolutely the time to go take some big risks, you know?
That moment, and I'd read about that. I'm going to mix it in with another post you made about your grandfather. Being Jewish and having my grandfather was young at that time, fighting in World War II, was in the Navy. And I know a lot of people commented on this post, and we'll link to this post in the show notes. It's a great post and beautiful, and it's important to see that. Your grandfather was there, and I don't know. So I'm going to mix those two posts and let you take it from there because you did buy a one-way ticket to go to Silicon Valley, right? And then you also tell the story of 1942 when your grandfather was working against the Nazis. And I'll let you take that from there.
Yeah, so comes back to, I grew up in a household. My mom and dad were super hippies. So they were super idealistic about the world and the change they wanted to see in it. They were very dysfunctional. They ended up getting divorced when I was a little kid. But my mom, actually, for all her faults, and I have had my issues with her and my dad as well, because they're flawed human beings, as most people are. But she always, when I would leave the house, even when I was a little kid, she would say to me, go out there, take some risks. And that philosophy, I think, has kind of became embedded in me in some ways. I mean, when I think about her story, she fled America during the 60s because she was against the Vietnam War. She was marching in Washington, against the Vietnam War. She was there when Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech, and so her boyfriend, they ended up getting married because they wanted to travel the world. He got drafted to the Vietnam War, and then they fled America and they went around Europe. They ended up splitting up, and then my mom met my dad in Denmark, and then it ended up, getting married and having 3 kids and so on. But she was a super hippie. She met my dad. He was a super hippie, and they're kind of like living that lifestyle. So I think there's something in me that's always been about having the courage to go out there and try something. And then when I learned about my grandfather's story, actually on both sides, I only wrote about one of my grandparents on my dad's side, who was in the Danish underground fighting the Nazis, and how he got captured several times, beaten by the Gestapo and so on, quite brutally. And he was sentenced to get executed on May 8th. It's kind of crazy. And then, of course, Denmark got liberated on May 5th. But I mean, he got captured. The third time he got captured was March 1945. And he was like beaten a lot by the Gestapo in their torture prisons. And then they sentenced him to get executed. And his wife was standing out there every day waiting for the news. And then he ended up getting released because we got liberated. But I mean, it's just like how close life can get sometimes. But like my grandfather on my mom's side, he actually worked in the Pentagon during the Second World War, working on some top secret projects around. He was in the Air Force, but he always wanted to go fight, but he had a handicap, so he couldn't go fight. He was disabled. He had a bad leg, so he ended up working on engineering projects and so on. But he was also Jewish on my mom's side and not on my dad's side. Anyway, there's a lot of information there, but I think knowing that history and having the encouragement I had from my parents around going and taking some risks always kind of colored my life. And so I've always had this kind of, I think, foresight in some ways that I don't want to look back on my life when I'm 60, 70, 80 years old and have a ton of regrets. And it's both because I think the way I was raised, but it was also because of the way I saw my dad. When they discovered he had cancer, it went like super quickly. Within 3 months, he was dead. And I remember I spent a lot of time with him at the end. And he was just kind of a man full of regrets. And he was quite bitter, if I'm honest about it. And we were never super close because I spent more time with my mom when they got divorced. But I got to know him in the later years, and he was never happy. And he always felt like he never had any success in life. I think he had so many regrets when he looked back in life that he didn't have the courage to take some of the bigger chances. And so I always used that as a guide. Okay, I used it very early on when I bought a one-way ticket from Denmark to California. I had that foresight that life is short. I want to give it a go. If I don't make it, at least I can look back and say to myself, I tried, and I learned a lot from it. And that's why I try to encourage all my teams. Like when we do some big epic shit, like there's a big chance it will fail. But if we succeed, it'll create a new trajectory for the company and your life, because you will always have that learning and that stamp that you have put on it. And then, of course, when my dad died there in 2008, it was a lot about the reflection around, well, okay, I've had a certain amount of success in my life, but I haven't maybe gotten as much. I've maybe forgotten a little bit of the courage that I used to have. And so I tried to step that up and think about, well, can I go into the future with a much more open mind? And I went on this road trip with my brother across America in 2009 to kind of celebrate his life. And we called it the Yes to Life Tour. And we just kind of took small roads. We tried all kinds of weird things, and just because we wanted to prove to ourselves that we haven't gotten stale or comfortable in some ways with the way life is, which is easy to get for all of us, I think, as we get older and we have a certain amount of success. And so it's all about like, how do you remind yourself of the grit that you have within you, the resilience that you have, that you can overcome so much more, and the courage that we all have within you. That's why I post so much about it on LinkedIn and all these other places, because I feel like most people have it. I don't think I'm unique in this way, but I think I'm unique in the way that I focus so much on it, and I purposefully remind myself of this all the time. I think people have way more courage than they give themselves credit for, and they can withstand a lot more than they think maybe they can. And so I know it's a very long answer and maybe all over the place, but it's like, it's a hard one to answer in the way, sense that it's still my North Star. I'm in my mid 40s at this point in time. I feel like I have so much more to give. It's why I jumped back in and became the chief business officer at Zensai, the company I'm at now, because I was doing a lot of advisory work, working with CEOs, but I felt like I was on the sidelines of life. And I'm like, I don't want to look back again on my life when I'm 70, 80 years old and be like, I don't want to be on the sidelines. I want to make a difference. I want to make an impact. And so I'm like, I had the courage, like, let me jump back into it. Even though I was like, wasn't sure if that was for me, but I love it now. I love it.
Thank you for that. Yeah. And what I think is amazing is you're sharing it obviously with your team, with your company, but you're out here, you're on a podcast, you're sharing on social media. And it's hard, right? Because you could go look on social media, you're like, oh, here's this happy-go-lucky guy, works at this company, he's had success. It's like, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
I don't have time for that nonsense. And when you understand, like, you just don't know what's going on with people, right? And nor should people, right? You don't have to know everybody's back. It's hard to do, right?
No.
Everyone's got enough going on. But when you have the opportunity to have a long form conversation and then to take that behind the scenes of what you're talking about on social media, like you're not just helping your company, you're helping everybody else out. You're helping your family, you're helping your son who's in college, right? And you said it in other things, like there isn't a specific answer to that question. Like it's just this long-winded response that's got it's so many stories baked into it that there's no like, oh, here's my final answer, right? That doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's only funny thing actually is that because I post a lot on social media, right? Because it's kind of the way I can spread the message of joy and hope and purpose and so on, which I try to do most of the time. But by far the posts that I get the most traction are all the posts about my fuck ups, my failures. Because I get why. It's because I think it makes people understand that they're not alone. I think everyone at some point in their life feels like a failure or an imposter, right? Or like, God, I screwed up, right? Of course, I felt it so many times. And I think it's just that sense that, wow, even this person who looks like he's got all his shit together actually is also has screwed up. Because this is always the problem I have with social media. I think it's obviously well documented is that everything makes it seem like your life is always up and to the right. And it really is. Life is like up and down, up and down. I mean, like, holy crap. I mean, that year my dad died, I had 4 deaths in my family. And I just felt like it was my year of death. I just went from funeral to funeral and I felt like it was a very heavy year that year, Oh my God. But you don't see that. I mean, I'm not going to post that woe is me on social media,
Yeah. A lot of times you hear the story, you watch the movie, it's like, oh, they rising, they hit this thing, they hit rock bottom, and they went back up and they never looked back, right? You're constantly reflecting and you're finding yourself probably in situations where like, and you have to get yourself back on track. It sounds like you're still working at it, right? Like you said, mid 40s, still going.
Totally. What have you done when you've gotten off track?
Man, I'll tell you what, honestly, conversations like this are super helpful.
Yeah.
And I think, because we'll do a lot of podcast production. And again, this is just in the moment thinking about it because it's like, well, that's not the final answer because there is no final answer. I think it's connecting with people. And I don't have this conversation with you and learn from you. And like, man, like your story is amazing. And it's like, you know what? Have more conversations. And it's simplicity, other things I love reading, right? Like when I was younger, I read about athletes and stuff, and that's great. Like read what you love until you love to read. And at some point, I don't know when it was, it's probably right before I started this business, right? I really took it seriously and then kind of scaled it up from there. And it's just something I love doing and moving, walking, like walk a ton, go to the gym, and my family and my kids, it's like, there's just so much you can do. So, but you realize like it's tough. Like we have kids going to college. It's like not cheap at all anymore. There's stresses. It's constant things that we're going, running a business is, I mean, obvious thing people are like a roller coaster ride, right?
Of course.
And so how do you keep yourself on track, but it's taking care of yourself, right? Like Jim Rohn said it. I know you've said it. It's like, you can work on your job, but you can work on yourself. And I think if I work on myself, I truly believe like, obviously it's going to help me out selfishly, but it's going to help everyone else around me. Because if I show up and I'm in a bad mood and I'm acting all shitty, like that's not good for anybody. But at the same time, it's like, sometimes it's going to happen. And can the people around you understand like, oh, he just needs a minute. Like, maybe he'll go for a walk or something.
Yeah. I'll tell you what I do is, because I think you're right. I mean, like when you have that moment of self-awareness, I think it's best to just kind of take yourself out of it, right? I mean, of course, I hate when I've been shitty to people, and it happens, like anybody else. And I'm like, oh shit, then I like take a moment out and then reflect on what it is. And hopefully I rectify that behavior. But what I try to do generally, I try to look when it comes to like Friday or Saturday, I try to always kind of do this self-assessment. It's a very simple thing I do where I look back on my week and like on a scale of 1 to 10, how am I doing? Am I making a difference? Am I having fun doing it? Am I laughing a lot and so on? And I usually like tens are rare, right? It's very rare to have a perfect week. But if I'm consistently like in a 7 to 10 state, I think that's pretty good. If I'm in a 4 to 6 state, it's usually like some big things happen that are not great. And the 1 to 3 state happens really, but maybe like if somebody dies or I have to like do some layoffs, which I've had to do, those are painful, right? But you can't stay there for forever. And so I always think about if you're consistently in the between 1 and 3, for me or anybody else, get the hell out of your job. Life is too short to be that miserable. If you're in a 4 to 6 state, just kind of do a course correction. Like, can you get it back on track, right? Everyone has those weeks. So that's not unusual. Don't beat yourself up if you have a week that's not great. But ideally, you should be like between, I think, 7 and 9 consistently and so on. But what I've now also started doing, because I think back on just the last week, I just did this actually exercise yesterday with my team because we were talking a little bit about it. I said, my last week, spiritually and mentally, emotionally, I was a 9. It was a really great week. Spent a lot of time with the team and so on. But honestly, like physically, I'm just exhausted because I was like every day last week, I was out doing something social. There was like executive evening, then there was an evening with the product marketing team, an evening with the product team. Then I had a personal thing. We went out and like 5 nights in a row. I was just doing something. I was just tired. I'm like we talked about, I'm just out of energy, out of battery, right? Just now I need some time to just recover and spend time with myself. So I think the 1 to 10 question is actually super valuable. But maybe you break it down into that. Maybe there's a physical quotient, like you just said. Like you like to work out. I do too. Walking. Maybe there's an emotional. Maybe there's a spiritual one. Like ideally, it all comes together. But in the grand scheme of things, the way I overcome the hard moments is action. I think. I mean, the people who navel gaze so much and go inward, which I think is valuable. I don't want anybody to misunderstand. It's not valuable to be self-reflective and go inward. But I also think you can do too much of it. At some point, it'll just drive yourself crazy. I meet people, and I've written about this as well, people who just kind of live in the past. They replay slights or faults or failures, and they replay like bad records that's stuck in a bad groove over and over. And I can just see they're just kind of driving themselves slowly crazy because what is it going to lead to? What's going to be the outcome of you just focusing on the past and not on the future? I've never seen that really lead to something super positive. So action is the best antidote to that feeling.
Yeah. You're talking about rumination, and that's very dangerous to go down. And you talked about communication, right? Which is kind of what I was saying too before, where you're kind of communicating a lot of times with yourself, right? That would be like journaling, thinking through it and getting consistent. Because how are you going to know? Like 1 to 10, it's like the first time I did it, I'm like, I don't know, 7, 8, whatever. My wife was actually dealing with back pain. So when they went in there, they would always ask her, what's your pain level? And she would be like, I don't know, like 5, 7, 10. It hurts like hell, right? But the more you do it, and they're just looking for the baselines, the more you do it, then you start dialing in your numbers a little bit more and you're starting to be honest about it. And I think that's super important. And then, and same thing with like if you're writing your journal or you're talking or you have someone, a spouse, a therapist, a friend, whatever, like that's great. But to your point is, even your hand can get tired from writing a lot. Your mouth could get tired from talking a lot. Your spouse could get tired from like, are you ever going to shut up? Right. Because at some point, it's like, just get to work. And that's some of the best things that you can do is just.
What's your number right now, Eric? If you look back on your last 7 days.
Man, that's such a good question. I'm going to be doing this. I'm good. It's been a couple things here and there. So I would probably say, I'd say an 8.
That's good. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. But then I could go back. Like I remember it would have been probably like the 8th day prior to the 9th, 10th day. I was so tired. And I remember just feeling tired, and it was at night, and my kids were studying for exams. My wife was tired, and I put on my Beats headset, and I just went through all sorts in a room, and I was just listening to music. And honestly, and I was just lying there, and I was just listening to music and lying there, and kind of like a little bit feeling sorry for myself because tired. And then, like on the other end of it, it helps so much, and then get back to it.
Yeah.
And to your point, like, and I've done this in the past where you're almost over fighting yourself through it. And so you're just putting yourself in a worse position. That's when you get sick, or that's when you injure yourself because you just go to the gym and you're going super hard and your shoulder hurts. You're like, okay, it's like, I'm not feeling it right now, to like pump the brakes, shut it down, watch a movie, eat some candy. I don't know. And I think that's important too, right? So, and for you to like ask me those questions here, it just speaks volume to like how you think about this and how you help people out. And there's no answer. Kind of like I was laughing. You said something about, I think it was an Amazon versus Uber conversation. Like Amazon's just like under promising, over delivering. And Uber is like, your car's going to be here in 2 minutes and it's 18 minutes later.
Oh my God,
And
it drives me
it's
crazy.
so funny, but it's so true. And
It's so true.
it brings that comedy into it, right? Because you can be like so pissed off. Like, I'm going to be late for my flight. I'm going to miss dinner, whatever. Yeah.
Right, that's right. One thing I really kind of struggle with, right, I've tried to really focus on is sleep. I've kind of become a little bit obsessive about it because it was so broken. I think in the last, honestly, 15 years of my career really taking off and me becoming an executive and leading bigger and bigger teams and being in like these hyper growth companies, my sleep was suffering. I wasn't sleeping well.
What is that? What is suffering? What would that mean for you?
I just lay and I toss and turn all night. I have a hard time falling asleep. I have a hard time staying asleep. And then when I wake up, I just kind of feel tired, It's like, and then I like, here you go. And so it feels like a never ending cycle. You never wake up like fully relaxed. And it's so weird because my wife used to always make so much fun of me. Like when I first met her, it's like, you could just like sleep forever. And it was great. And I just had it nailed and it was really broken. And then so I went on this journey to like get my sleep back in many ways. And I actually went to this sleep retreat in Italy. Sounds very fancy, right? But I was just I wanted to take myself into a new environment, out of my daily environment, and try to learn how to sleep. And they would put on some sensors on me and monitor my sleep, and they'd walk me through various courses and different things I could do to kind of get better at it. But one of the things I said to him, and that comes back to kind of I think about life a lot, because this idea you said about like eating a bowl of candy or something, because I've read all the books about sleep. I've listened to podcasts. I've read articles. I know all the theory. It's like, and it makes it sound like you have to be the perfect human being if you want perfect sleep. Like, right? I mean, seriously, like it's so stressful even thinking about it. It's like you have to wake up at the same time every day. You have to go to bed at the same time. You have to eat the same food every day. No alcohol, blah, blah, blah. You have to sleep in a darkened room at 66 degrees and all this stuff. I'm like, who lives like this? What kind of world is this like? And so I said to him when I showed up at this retreat, I said, I know all the theories. So I like, don't treat me like, I don't want a program that follows this here because I live a dynamic life. I like to go out with friends. I like being social. I travel a lot, sometimes for work, sometimes for family. It means I sleep in different beds. I'm not always in the same room. I don't always go to bed at the same time. I need the sleep hacks for a dynamic life because I don't want to, again, look back on my life when I'm 80, 90 years old and be like, oh, I live like a monk. Like, how boring is that? It's like, I don't think I'm put here on planet Earth to live the perfect life and be the perfect human being every day. That's kind of an illusion. I want to experience life to its fullest. I want to squeeze the juice out of life, but I want that at the same time. I also want good sleep. So, of course, what I learned is a lot about the rituals you have and the mindset that you have and how you kind of, because you can take that anywhere. I can be a flight to New York and I can be New York, and then I can stay in a different hotel room. And the ritual I have an hour before bed, I can take that anywhere, of course, right? But my point is like you said, you got to give yourself permission to live life in a way I think that brings you joy. When I see these stories of people who are trying to be perfect in their rituals and routines, I'm just like, part of me, of course, goes, "Oh, that's really impressive." And part of me goes,
Yeah.
"That's really boring."
Yeah. Well, when you think about like when I asked you earlier about energy, a lot of times you'll hear like, well, this is what I do in the morning. I wake up, I sit for an hour in the sun, I have my overnight. And if that's what you do, that's great. But is that real? Like,
Is that real? Yeah, exactly.
yeah. Because I think it's like living in that, there's just uncertainty. I think you even talk about that a lot. Like there's going to be uncertainty. So what are you going to do about it?
Well, it's like that Brian Johnson guy, right? Who's getting so much acclaim, right? Because of the way he wants to live forever or whatever. And his routine, it just cracks me up. I'm kind of fascinated because I just think it's interesting to hear about this stuff, right? Of course, super fat. It's so funny. I'm like, I have literally zero desire to mimic any of the things that he's doing. I'm like, it's just like, oh, like think I was like, oh, after 2:00, I don't eat anything or drink any liquids.
Right. Because then what happens when you like go to that event? You're like, they're having a martini. I want a martini, or I want, right? Like, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what you're going to remember when you lay there on your deathbed, 90 years old. Like, oh yeah, that's great.
Man, I lived it perfectly.
I lived it perfectly. Great. Good for you. But that's also why I put out the stuff that I do, because I think I want to give people permission. I think they do, of course, but like just live your life. It's like do what you want,
Yeah.
man.
We need more of that. We do. I think we need more people, and I think people need to see it for what it is, as opposed to someone trying to impress the masses. Like, oh, look at me, kind of like I was saying before. And social media is difficult in that space. So it's like, yeah, I think that's good. And like you've said before, this is an interesting topic. It's coming back a lot because what Amazon just did, the return to office, right? Return to office, work from home, hybrid. And you had thoughts on it, you have perspectives on it, but you don't have necessarily the answer for it. Like, well, this is the way to do it. Right. So I've been fascinated by that topic since COVID and continue to be. And watching the dynamic play out to where it's like, oh, there's certain things you have to do this way, right? It's very matter of fact, but like, and maybe it's changes, right? Maybe you've been through it since you made that post. Like, where do you stand on that whole polarizing topic today?
I think the shift to remote work happened so quickly, and obviously we were not prepared for it in many ways. How to deal with it, how to collaborate well, communicate well, mentor people, blah blah blah, all this stuff. And we're well documented. What's so fascinating to me is that there's two conversations about it. There's the public conversation and the private one. The private one that I'm having with CEOs, most of them want people back in the office. Why is that? It's not so much because of just the productivity. Productivity is one thing, but part of it's like the sense of belonging and being part of something, and the culture kind of is missing a little bit and so on. And honestly, I totally get it. I feel that too. There's no doubt remote work, you can be probably more productive than in an office, more efficient. I think that's also well documented. But is it as joyful? I hear oftentimes no from people. Does it give you as much of a sense of belonging? No. But I also think it depends on the kind of company. So I've always kind of pursued companies that are purpose led and kind of going into kind of growth mode. And those are hard journeys, to be honest. And so I joined kind of a band of brothers, a group of people who are there because they want to change the world in many ways. And my fear with remote work has always been that for a lot of people, then a job just becomes a job. And because, again, of the way I was raised and all the story we just talked about, I think I'm very idealistic in some way. I've never wanted work to just be a job. I wanted to be more me. Again, coming back to, I don't want to look back on my life when I'm 90 years old and just like that I hated that part of my life, the job, which I spend so much time on, but everything else was great. I want my work to be meaningful. I want to make a difference. And so my fear with remote work is that you lose a little bit that sense of camaraderie and being in it together, fighting something that's worth fighting for. I think you can have it remote. Don't get me wrong. I think you can definitely have it, but I do think it's harder to create that sense, that where you're like, wow, there's like something, a commonality between us and what we're working on. So the reason why the answer is so hard, and I think nobody's cracked the code, because it's so much depends on the industry you're in, the size of the company, the level of the job, the kind of job. And when you try to paint everyone with the same picture, I think you fail. There's certainly lots of roles that are way better, I think, when you're together. Marketing, like especially the marketing brainstorming and creative aspect. When you're trying to work on like really creative projects, it's nearly impossible to do remotely. It's very unsatisfying, maybe a better way of putting it. But there's some roles, like if you're an engineer and you just need that deep work, or maybe you're in tech support or whatever, then of course being remote is probably the best thing for you, right? But trying to treat everyone the same way, I think you just fail. So I think you got to do it. And then there's a level. Like I'm, as I said, in my 40s, very comfortable either with people and also remote. I probably spend 60 to 70% of my time remote on my own. I'm very comfortable because I have the discipline and the skills and maybe to deal with it. But I also know, like my nephew just went into the job market and he's really struggling with it. His first job was like as an SDR. He was working as an SDR in a remote job. God, that was tough. So you're sitting there all day. Think about it, the cold calling people, trying to reach out to people, and you're pretty much getting rejected all the time. And so who's going to give you a high five at the end of the day saying, hey, you tried? Or who's going to like pat you on the back and say, let's go for a walk and chat about this. Let's go for a drink. Like you just like left there with your own misery and the feeling of failure, right? So that really sucks if you're just remote, right? So there's some jobs and some levels and some ages where I think being together is so much more joyful and so much more purposeful. And of course, then there are lots of factors that weigh in. Then there's commute, of course. I know makes a big difference for people. That seems to kind of be the number one thing. And I get it. I mean, like when I was in Silicon Valley, I was living in a town called Los Altos and I was working in San Francisco. And my commute was about an hour each way. minimum, right? And sometimes if there was heavy traffic, it would be like an hour and a half. So I would spend 2 to 3 hours of my day commuting to my work. And now when I think about that, I'm like, God, that I wasted a lot of time commuting, honestly. I really did, where I could have been either with my family or so I get the negative reaction people are having. But then, I mean, you got to decide at what point in your life, what matters to you most, right? I think I wasted a lot of time commuting when my kid was young. I probably could have done it differently, but that was the way that it operated. Now, if I had the choice, would I accept something where I had to commute that much every day? I don't think so, honestly, right?
Sure.
So I know this game, it's like most of life. It's like, it depends. It's a convoluted answer. It's not like clear cut, but I do know it feels like there's these two conversations happening. The private conversations with CEOs, sometimes very much, they miss having people around them. They miss the feeling of being together, the sense of belonging. But if they say that publicly, they fear that they will just get reamed out completely because the mob comes after them about, you're so old school, you don't get it, blah, blah, blah. And it's not that they don't get it, but they started these companies, so they created these companies because they're trying to do something meaningful that matters. And they feel like they're losing a little bit of that in this remote work world.
Yeah. I heard Sandbox, an AI company, talking about on Moonshots, the podcast. It's an episode, we can link to it. But if they're in Texas and they want to hire someone from New Jersey, but that person's got a support system, they have a spouse, they have a family, the kids in school, like, do we want to make them move to Austin, Texas, wherever they are?
Yeah.
And because that's not just, we get you here, but now we're moving your family and all these connections and extended family that was there, right? There's that aspect of it. And then what they could say is like, we could still meet up, right? So it's kind of like, families change so much, right? Like you talked about, like you're vacationing and you're going to be in Denmark and you're going to have family come together, but that can't happen all the time. And nowadays it's like, I'm originally from Buffalo, New York. And when I was there, a lot of my family was there. We had extended family elsewhere in California and all that kind of stuff, but we'd still get together. But the family in Buffalo was there. Now everything's so much more spread out. Traveling's much easier, but it's also traveling's stressful as well. And like I talked, you get sick and you're tired. And I think about your nephew coming out of college is you're going from school days and then you go to college and you're surrounded by so many kids. And then you go out and you're like working from home. And then once you do that, let's say for a year, 2 years, 5 years, like how do you re-enter society in a way? And then the loneliness epidemic is no joke. Like that's a real thing.
It's no joke. Totally. And how are you going to level up your skills if you have nobody to model yourself after? How are you going to learn from mentors? I mean, I am under no illusion. I am where I am today 100% because so many people saw something in me and invested in me and gave me the skills with the push I needed or said, hey, you should go learn this and so on. If you don't have those people around you, I'm super grateful for the mentors I've had, bosses, teachers, whatever it is. How are you ever going to level up? I was even speaking to a leader the other day, and they were really frustrated. Like, nobody's coming into our office. This was kind of a head of marketing. And she was saying, and you know what? Like 5 of my team members are within like a walking distance of here, like literally like in the buildings around us here, and they still don't come in. They still work from home. And I was like, well, that's tough, right? But at the same time, if we're being honest about maybe there's something deeper going on then, right? Could be, right? Like, why is it that people are not coming? Is there a cultural issue or whatever it is? So there's probably many layers to this as well, right? I mean, I get it if you're like an hour and a half commute, an hour commute, maybe 45 minutes commute. But if you're like, live 2 doors down and you still don't want to come into work, I'm like, maybe you've just gotten so comfortable. It's like one of the people I follow a lot, Jason Lemkin, he's kind of infamous, in the tech world. He writes a lot about this. And he wrote something recently about, and he said, it even applied to me, but maybe we just got too comfortable during the pandemic meeting. And he's like, just wearing sweatpants all day and just kind of, tooling around at home and so on, right? We don't really want to leave the house anymore. But coming back to then what you just said, fair enough. But then I worry about the loneliness epidemic that we have. Like, is that the world we want to live in where we're so isolated and separated from each other?
Well, and if you can allow, which you all are doing this, right? We can get into the AI aspect of it. If we can get more into the beginning of our conversation, the soft skills, right? The creative work. There's just something about that's a big reason like why we like to help business owners. Like if they're creating a podcast, if they're writing an article, if they're going into this more creative mind, they enjoy their job more. They enjoy everything about their work. And it's a nice break for them. And then it's like there's other benefits. You become a better communicator, better listener, better question asker. You're meeting new people and opportunities, leverage. But like, I think there's AI, if it's going to help you do a lot of the tasks, right? And that everyone on the team, not just the business leaders, can get more into that space of communicating, of connecting, and all that kind of stuff. Like that seems like that's a good thing, right? That's going to create more jobs. It's going to create more opportunities as opposed to, sorry, you don't have a job anymore. It's going to create more, to use your Learn 365, right? It's going to create more learning opportunities where you can build upon your skills and stack those.
Yes. I think of it this way, that AI is going to be the superpower that everyone's going to have to level up their skills, right? And of course, it's going to have tremendous impact on your hard skills. It's going to disrupt everything to do with hard skills. We're already seeing that. Anything to do with using prompts to get information quickly, or getting feedback, or writing drafts of stuff and all kinds of stuff. AI is just amazing. But synthesizing data is what, of course, it's like the best at. You can't compete with that. But when it comes to soft skills, like let's say it's a simple scenario, you're a first-time manager, you're managing a team of 3 people. You have somebody who's a new grad, you have somebody who's been doing it for 10 years, and maybe somebody Gen X, a little bit older. How the heck are you going to learn the skills to manage those kind of 3 kinds of personalities? They will have very different motivations and different requirements, and they care about different things and so on. Is AI going to teach you those things? There's no way, right? There's no way. Maybe sometime in the future, I don't know about that. I can't predict that, but we're very far away from that. And so, and when I think again, also back on my 25 years of being a leader, I would probably say that 95%, if not more, of the times I've had to coach and mentor people, it's nearly always on the soft skills. That's where they usually fail, because there's something that they are not able to achieve, usually because of communication or collaboration skills or some kind of soft skill that they're lacking. Maybe they're not assertive enough. Maybe they lack some kind of empathy or compassion or something that is turning people off from wanting to work with them or wanting them to succeed. And so I see a lot of times people get very frustrated because they're like, but I'm doing the work. I'm delivering what you asked me to deliver. I said, yes, but the way you did it is in such a way that it's not conducive to a positive work environment. Or you were an asshole while you did this because you didn't care about anybody else. And so I think we're going into a world, but this gives me a lot of hope for the future, where how you do things matters as much as what you do and the outcome of what you do. And so, first time in my life, I've worked in a lot of different companies, sales, LinkedIn, Box, WeWork, and so on. And I've always tried to work on things that I'm passionate about. So LinkedIn, I cared so much about when I worked there a couple of years, because to me, it was the last kind of positive social network. People take pride in the way they show up. They treat each other with respect. There's very few trolls on there. They happen to be there, but very few, honestly, compared to so many of the other social networks, which I think just seem to end up being very negative. And so I love that. And then when WeWork reached out to me, I thought the mission of WeWork was in some way a physical manifestation of LinkedIn, like a space where people can come together in a positive way. And by the nature of us being together, we make each other better. We teach each other skills. We kind of become the best of each of us individually together. So that's beautiful. And now I'm at this company, Zensai. And the reason I went here is because for the first time, I feel like what we do as a company is completely 100% aligned with me as a person. So what do? We call ourselves the Human Success Company. We're all about one thing. We're hyper focused on creating a platform that makes people be the best that they can be every single day. And our North Star, the North Star that I have, that I fight against, that I don't want to live in this world where 70% of people are miserable. When you look at all the data from Gallup and McKinsey and HBR, they all kind of say the same thing. 2 out of 3 people want to quit their jobs. 70% of people want to quit their jobs. And I can guarantee you those people are not showing up every day doing the best work of their life. And if you dig deep into why they want to quit their jobs, you choose because they feel stuck. They don't feel like they're growing. They don't feel like they're learning any new skills. They don't feel like they have anybody on their side that's mentoring and coaching them. So they feel stuck. They feel like there's nowhere for them to go. And so what we do at this company is can we basically be the best coach, mentor that you could have, giving you the skills, knowledge, connections, path that you want. I want our platform to be able to be the thing that you use to become the best version of yourself. So if you say, today I'm a junior sales manager or an SDR, and I maybe want to become a sales director in the next 10 years, I want to be the platform that takes you on a path and a journey to get there. Here are the skills you need to learn. Here are the people you should connect with. Here are the courses you should take. Here's the goals you should set for yourself. That's why we call ourselves that. And it's fully aligned with what I've been preaching for the last 10 years, even before I joined this company a year and a half ago. So it's great when you finally work on something that's so aligned with your personal mission, because then you can fully stand behind it. When I go out and do presentations at conferences and so on, like, I'm not trying to tell them this is what I've been preaching anyway. Like, the best people are the ones who have this incredible support network around them, who pushes them to become the best that they can be every single day. I'm sure, Eric, I mean, I've known you for a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you've had a lot of people in your life who've kind of given you the skills that you needed to be successful. And I want that for everyone. What a great world. Because when you think about, if I then get kind of a little bit metaphysical on this, but think about the challenges that we have in the world, and that our kids are going into this kind of facing climate change, inequality. Maybe there's, sustainability challenges. There's challenges around, food deserts. There's challenges around lots of different things in the world. So many, right? Sometimes these challenges are small, and sometimes they feel like so overwhelming. And all a company is a group of people who are coming together to solve challenges for the purpose of whatever they're doing. Sometimes these challenges are small, and sometimes they're really big. But if you want people to show up every day and give it their all, provide innovative ideas, new ideas, give their energy and passion, well, you better damn well give them an environment where they can succeed and they're motivated by. All the data also shows that companies who have figured it out, they end up outperforming their peers. So it's not rocket science. I feel like I'm like talking about the obvious, like companies who have employees that are happier and more motivated. Go figure, they do better than other companies. Oh, wow, what a shocker.
Right.
It's like,
Right.
But so when you see that, 70% is a crazy high number. 70% of people want to quit their jobs because they're unhappy. And if we really want to make a dent in the universe, let's see if we can change that. That's the mission I'm on.
Yeah. And it's tough when you're in that position at a company and you feel like, I've been there, right? And I remember calling my dad one time and I was going to the office, and that talk about words of encouragement that you have on the back end of it, and said, I can't do this anymore. It was in the insurance financial space, and I felt like they weren't telling the truth about commissions, like basic stuff for these agents that were out there. And he says, you should walk it and quit. And granted, I was talking to other companies at this time, so I was trying to set myself up for the future or for the next step, at least for that. And he says, why would you waste another day in that if you're this upset about it? And he was 1,000% right. And I walked in there and I left. And that was, to have someone to support you on that, but you're trying to help other people do that same type of thing and have that same type of you're advocating for them almost. You're like sounding board in it. And then to get into the quick specifics of it, which obviously people can go to your website and learn about it. It ties in with Microsoft, which so many companies and large enterprises are on Microsoft, and they're using Microsoft Teams and Outlook and all this type of stuff. And AI's behind the scenes. So quickly explain how that would work, because it looks like courses are being created for you, right? And you're a junior sales manager, or maybe, right, you have a lot of companies now are doing what you're doing. They're showing up, they're presenting, they're showing up on podcasts, they're showing up on YouTube videos, right? So how would that look for a company to say, great, yeah, I would love to teach our people a lot more, and so they can continue to learn and they could be happier? How do we do that? Because I'm busy and I don't have a ton of time with it, but obviously AI comes into the picture now.
Yeah, so back to the AI, because I think it's a great question. I mean, I was just in San Francisco 2 weeks ago. It was very bleak. There was a lot of billboards everywhere. It talked about, don't hire humans, just use AI. I'm like, ooh, is that really the kind of world? I'm like, oof, oof. I'm like, the way we think about AI is we want to use AI as a superpower to make people the best that they can be. Maybe uncovering the path that you can get on, or the skills that you don't have. So the way we think of it, there's really kind of 3 core elements to our platform, what we call the human success platform. There's a learning part of it, which means can we give you the skills and knowledge you need to be successful both today, but also in the future? And that's about taking the right courses, learning from the right people, and so on, either in a live environment or maybe videos or courses and so on. It's one part of it. The second part is performance management, making sure you have clarity on the goals you need to hit, your team needs to hit, the company needs to hit, and so on. It's very hard to achieve momentum or growth if you actually don't know what you're trying to achieve in the first place. And then finally, it's the employee engagement, which is the part of the platform that's probably the used the most, where people do their check-in every week, say, what did I achieve? What's blocking me? And who do I want to give a high five to? Right? And you start seeing the high fives flying across the company between all these different departments. It's so funny. I just got this stat today, so I'm very excited about it. We're 200 people in our company. And in 2024, we had over 14,000 kudos fly between people. And so what do you think that does? It makes people feel like they matter. I feel seen. I feel a sense of belonging because this person in Australia just called me out because I helped them with something, or this person in the US just called out this person in Romania because they work together. And so you start seeing these kudos. It creates a sense of belonging and purpose and knowing each other. But think about what this does. So there's these kind of three core elements to our platform. But the more data we have about you and how you're doing every single week, what's working for you, Eric, what's not working for you, who are you working really well with. So if we take that and we combine it with the goals that you have and also the learning that the skills you're getting all the time, we can start forming a fairly good picture of your potential today, but also maybe where you could go in 3 years, 5 years, and so on. A good manager, I'm sure you've had some in your life, right? I've certainly have some of them. They use pattern recognition. They go, hey, Eric, you're really good at this, but I can see if you invest a little bit more here, you could, in 2-3 years, really excel in this part of the business. And that's what I want our platform to do. But we can only do that if we kind of know enough about you, like what's working, what's not working, the kind of personality you have, and so on. Then we can guide you on a path that becomes better and better and better. That's why we have something called human success journeys that basically says, okay, I'm here. I feel like I have these skills. Here's what I'm good at, what not so good at. And I want to get here. Show me the path to get there. Who do I need to connect with in the company? What should I learn? What skills should I be getting? What goals should I be setting for myself? All those kind of things. That's how you achieve greatness. And that's how we have companies like Audi and Coca-Cola and BDO and Porsche. They're all like on our platform and they're using us for exactly that purpose to upskill, up-level, and create a purpose for their employees to be the best they can be every single day. But you're right, we're built on Microsoft. And so we use their AI. So it's actually a superpower. We're Microsoft top tier partner. And so we don't have a huge AI team. We're not creating our own LLMs because we're just using the best one that's out there, which is Microsoft's AI. So it actually gives us a lot of freedom to focus on the features and the functionality as part of the platform that gets you to have this invisible hand behind it. Because I think of AI as kind of this invisible force that's behind it all, but you don't see it. You shouldn't be thinking about, oh, this is AI that I'm interacting with. It's just kind of guiding you like a good manager would do, right?
Yeah. The pattern recognitions, it just made me think of a manager. He would always tell me, because we'd spend time together. We would go out for dinner. We would watch sporting events together. He would, and he'd get on me, get on my ass, like, what are you doing? Like, what was wrong last month? That kind of thing. And he says, you're going to run a company. Like, I totally see it. You have this skills and that skill. And he would encourage it. And it wouldn't help him if I would have left when he was there, right? Because he'd lost that production. And then you have other people in the company that says, well, you can't leave because what are you going to do about health insurance? You have a family and you have all these things. And they would say that stuff to you in meetings, and which only gave me more like, want to.
Exactly.
Because they didn't know the pattern. They didn't have any patterns. They only saw you at the annual sales meeting and all that stuff. And it was just like, it was kind of, quite frankly, all bullshit. But like this individual knew me, knew my family, and he could see the patterns. And then you mix that in with the tools that you all are bringing to the table. Absolutely.
But that's why that weekly check-in is so important. It's we call it the heartbeat of our platform, because if you just do it every now and then, if you just have a conversation with your manager once a year, how useful is it going to be? How much is he or she going to know about you? But if you, every week, I see what's going well for you, what's not going well, where you're having, I can see, I didn't succeed in this project because I was misaligned with somebody else in another part of the business. Okay, maybe there's a communication issue. Maybe it's a collaboration issue. Maybe there's a misalignment on goals. Right? It could be lots of things. But the more I know about that, then I can course correct that for you. So you actually get out of this like, oh shit, that doesn't work for me. This doesn't work. So you can get on a path where you feel like you're achieving success. So we have this kind of mantra at our company where we say, it's all about everyday mastery. You don't run a marathon. I try to do one every year, but you don't run a marathon just like because from one day to another. It's like you have to set a plan, and then you call the shots, and then you follow that plan. Maybe not perfectly, but you have to follow it fairly well, and then you can get to that outcome that you seek. So if you have the goal, like I want to become a director of sales in the next 5 years, well, if you're just shooting blindly, how likely are you to actually get there? Is there a plan? Who's going to be on your side? What skills are you going to get? All that stuff. That's what we're all about.
Yeah. So we tell our kids too, right? Like it's the same kind of.
Exactly.
There's like, you want it right now. And we do, right?
That's right.
So,
That's right.
Well, Robin, this is amazing. I love this conversation. I could go on for hours. I mean, there's so many other topics. We'll have you back on and talk more about it. But where can people follow you? Obviously, LinkedIn and X, but your information there and your website for Zensai.
Yeah, Zensai.com. So it's Z or SED, as they say in Europe. SED, E-N, sai.com, and you just find me on LinkedIn. I'm probably the first Robin Daniels that comes up because I overshare.
Yeah, it's good.
I like sharing.
Yeah.
Sometimes too much, as my wife tells
Yeah.
me. That's okay.
That's perfect. Yeah.
She just makes endless fun of me, but that's okay. I'll take the punches.
Yeah. Yes. That's amazing.
She's always like, oh, here's another post with some motivational saying and say, have a good day, peace.
Yeah. That's all it
basically
is.
true.
Yeah.
She should know. She takes all the photos, so she knows.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, man, like tell her that it made our conversation so much better to be able to have that. And I've heard this, and there's an individual we work with, and I was wondering, it's like, how is this going for you? Like, you're creating content, you're posting on LinkedIn, you're sharing it into different places, but like, what do you think about it? Like, you could say, oh, it's got these analytics and these numbers. It's like, that might help you. He's like, when I show up to meetings and headhunters are setting up appointments for him, they're already showing up. They've seen me talk. They've heard me, all this stuff. It helps me immensely. And so when you hear from people like that, that's like, wow, this is working. So it's not maybe exactly what say, well, it hasn't monetized yet. Like, that's okay. And you spending an hour and a half in like preparing for this, coming off, and then after this, you get a couple, whatever you do next, it's a lot of time out of your day to do this. So number one, I very much appreciate your time to do this, but for this new world of long form content, of sharing content on social media, people are like, that's a waste of time. Why would you do that? Obviously, I mean, you're in a lot of different shows right now, right? And so clearly you and because your company would be like, why, Robin, why are you wasting your time doing that? They're clearly not saying that.
No, absolutely. I mean, because I think two things kind of guides me. One is I'm not going for volume. I get a lot of people reaching out to me who want to like, hey, you can get so much more reach and likes and blah, blah. It's not what I'm going for. I'm not interested. And of course, I care that people read my content because I try to be thoughtful about it. I just care when I get like one or two people who say, this made a difference in my life. It mattered. Like, I changed my perspective, or you made my day. I get a lot of DMs that say that. I'm like, then I know that it mattered, right? I'm not going for like a gazillion likes. And then in terms of like the business itself, I mean, like, I'm trying to change the conversation around work. That's why I'm all like I'm not gonna. I think of this as like, I will talk to anyone. Literally, Eric, I will talk to anyone who will listen, because I'm like, I'm not that important. I'm like, if somebody will listen to what I have to say for half an hour, I'll talk to anyone. I mean, like, I try to be, of course, selective. I can't talk to anyone all the time, but I'm like, I want to just like reach people. So thank you for allowing me to come on your show, honestly, and talk so openly about this. I think I had a conversation that's much deeper than I normally have, because I feel very short, these conversations all the time. This is long and deep. I love it. I could go on, though. I feel good vibes, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we do it again. I mean, there's so many more conversations to come up with AI, with ethics, and like, you have corporate ethics and working from home. Like, that conversation is going to continue, and we'll see how it all plays out. So, Robin, pleasure getting to know you and talking with you. So thank you.
Thanks, Eric. All right, man. Take care. Happy holidays.
This is a Quiet Loud Studios production, the podcast network where reflection meets amplification.